Hello, and welcome everyone to another live discussion. First one we've had in a little while. Thanks for joining us. See, we got Akatsuki and Jeff and Faku on YouTube. Stregahex is over on Facebook. Thanks for joining us. Lobsel, hello. Today we'll be discussing the symbolism and the themes of alchemy as it is presented in Haunting Ground, which we finished streaming, a week or two ago, I think? It was recent. It was pretty recent. I meant to do this sooner, but it took a while to really bring together everything I was researching. But what we're going to do is we're going to spend the first half discussing what alchemy is, a little bit of its history, the symbols, the science, and the what it is. And then once we've discussed that, we're going to go and discuss how it relates to Haunting Ground and what it means for Haunting Ground's story. Hello, Sky Center, Cygnus, ET. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We're going to be working from a couple different books, if you get interested in wanting to read more. The Black Arts by Richard Cavendish is one that I really like. It's pretty easy to read. Alchemy and Mysticism from the Hermetic Museum, which is a bunch of old imageries and artwork and stuff, some of which you'll see here. Another one is called Alchemy, The Art of Transformation by Jay Ramsey. It's a little different. It is a self-help book, but it also discusses a lot of alchemy's history and some things that way. It's interesting. Today, alchemy does live on as something of a self-help program because alchemy is about transformation of the self, and it has been long used to transform the person and the individual, but it is today. There are a lot of self-help books centered around the concept of alchemy. Hello, Gerard. Haunting Ground, for those who don't know, weren't part of the stream, is a video game. It is technically the fourth Clock Tower game. You play as a young woman named Fiona, exploring a terrible, creepy castle full of dangers, and a bad guy who wants to use your Azoth to create immortality. And we're going to discuss how all those different things and terms and stuff have to do with alchemy, which is the main central conceit of the game is based on alchemy, the search of immortality and what have you. So what is alchemy? Well, we're going to start with the Tabula Smaragdina, the Emerald Tablet, which is, there's a version of it there on the screen, not actually emerald. It is an ancient tablet from like 3,000 years ago that was supposedly written in Egypt, and it is 12 lines that basically describe the whole of alchemy, what alchemists are trying to do, and how to achieve immortality. It's said to have been written by Hermes Trismegistus, which means thrice great. You'll see the number 3 show up a lot. Hermes, of course, being one of the gods of Greece, the god of magic and transportation. He had a lot of different powers, most famous for being the guy with the wings on his sandals, but he was incredibly powerful and very important to the occultists, which is how you get, like, the words hermetically, hermetic arts, that kind of thing, comes from Hermes. Or a human named for him, supposedly wrote the Green Tablet, and the Green Tablet is the origin of a lot of different famous alchemy ideas and things that later alchemists would go on and try and explore and make sense of. So I'm going to read the Green Tablet to you, or the Emerald Tablet. Emerald referred to any tablet or any stone that was green in those days. It probably was not made of emerald. It was just green. In truth, certainly, and without doubt, whatever is below is like that which is above, and whatever is above is like that which is below, to accomplish the miracles of one thing. Just as all things proceed from one alone by meditation on one alone, so also they are born from this one thing by adaptation. Its father is the sun, and its mother is the moon. The wind has borne it in its body, its nurse is the earth. It is the father of every miraculous work in the whole world. Its power is perfect if it is converted into earth. Separate the earth from the fire and the subtle from the gross, softly and with great prudence. It rises from earth to heaven and comes down again from heaven to earth, and thus acquires the power of the realities above and the realities below. In this way, you will acquire the glory of the whole world, and all darkness will leave you. This is the power of all powers, for it conquers everything subtle and penetrates everything solid. Thus, the little world is created according to the prototype of the great world. From this and in this way, marvelous applications are made. For this reason, I am called Hermes Trismegistus, for I possess the 3 parts of wisdom of the whole world. Perfect is what I have said of the work of the sun. That is how to make the Philosopher's Stone, which you've probably heard of, and which is a large focus of what alchemists do and what they are trying to do. A lot of it is reading stuff like that and trying to make sense of what it means, because alchemists could never be straightforward. They could never just say things the way that they meant them. Probably because, on the one hand, they didn't want people to steal their stuff. They wanted to keep it secret. Also because alchemy had a lot in common with other occult traditions like the Kabbalah. They grew up in the same era. A lot of the same people studied them. And Kabbalah had a tradition of being passed on by word of mouth and being kept secret. And so that just kind of, I think, these kind of arts, there was a feeling of wanting to keep them secret, so only the people that put in the work could have them. So the Emerald Tablet is one of the oldest examples of these kind of really hard to understand explanations for what was a science and a mythology. It was religion and it was chemistry. Because back in these days, the kind of time we're talking about, like from the ancient Egypt times to the medieval period, religion was seen as truth. God made the universe. That's just how it is. So religion is science, and science is a form of faith. You could look at the Bible and say, oh, God made the world by blowing wind. Obviously, some kind of literal scientific thing is happening here where he blew breath and blah, that kind of thing. So the Bible was being interpreted as a scientific text. These people were weaving together philosophy and a scientific study. And so that's how you get things like noble gases being considered noble because they were morally superior to other gases. Everything in the universe kind of had a moral value to it that had to do with its scientific use and its religious aspect. Alright, so alchemy is a science and it is a faith. It was an attempt to imitate nature. There was this understanding that the universe kind of had a formula to it, and God knew the formula, and he could wave his magic wand and do what he wanted. Well, if God made us in his image, then clearly there's some kind of potential in us to do the same thing. Obviously, we're just a little bit off. If we could just figure out the formula, if we could crack the code, then we could wave the magic wand and make gold, or be immortal. You know, the possibility, the potential was there. The belief was that the world was corrupted, that everything had become impure, and if you could just remove the impurities, then you could figure things out, and you could, make lead turn into gold, and make a sick person cured. If you could just figure out the formula, get rid of the impurities, make things as close to God as possible, make a human as close to God as possible, anything's possible. That was the alchemy. That was the attempt to become like God. Whether that meant becoming immortal, curing diseases, turning things into gold. It was a lot of different things, but it was basically cracking the code of the universe to try and become like God. Wouldn't it be blasphemy to know or try to know what God knew? That's one reason this kind of stuff would probably have been kept secret, because at certain times in certain places, that would have been blasphemous. Not every culture would have seen it that way, but especially there were times when it would have been dangerous to say that kind of thing, or people would have been mad at them. But there was also the belief that people were intended to be as God was. It wasn't so much like, I'm gonna be like God. It was more like, I will purify myself. It was a self-reflection. There was a lot of soul searching. So the idea was that you were purifying yourself. You were going to make yourself good and pure again and be like God. The idea was that when you die and your soul ascends to heaven, you become like God. Well, what if you could have a soul that ascends to heaven without dying? You could be pure. So it wasn't necessarily something that the person might see as blasphemous. Other people might see as blasphemous, but it really depended on the time period, I feel like. Alchemy argues that everything is part of God's work. If you can just figure out the formula, figure out, what he was doing, then you could change those, you could change those rules, alter those rules, and figure things out. Alchemy involves the transmutation of base metal into gold, during which consciousness is radically altered. It was kind of like a kind of reaching nirvana in a certain way. The belief basically was, through scientific experiments, you could ascend, you could astral project, that kind of thing. It varied from person to person. Every alchemist had their own ideas about how to do things. There were 4 steps, there were 7 steps. You had to use this chemical, you had to use that. But over the years, certain things kind of became hardcore beliefs. Certain things, every alchemist was like, yep, that's true, even if maybe their process was a little different from the next guy. Yes, it was more like figuring out God's design. Yes, Faku, you're right. Being godlike was the sense of God is a pure and wondrous being, and we want to be pure and wondrous as well. We want to not have impurities. It wasn't necessarily like becoming God, but like being akin to God, I guess. Kabbalah had a lot to do with alchemy. They had a lot of things in common. A lot of the most famous alchemists, like Mary the Jewess, were Jewish. So they have a lot of things in common. So getting back to our things, our sort of universal alchemy ideas. Let's see. We got the 4 elements and the Trinity, I guess is the easiest way to put it. So the Trinity is the concept of the power of 3. And there's a lot of different special 3s that are very important to alchemy. The first one we'll talk about is body, soul, and spirit. You might be a little confused and say, what's the difference between soul and spirit? Well, the alchemists recognized that various species were unique to themselves. Like if a deer got pregnant, it would have a baby deer and not a moose. Why does that happen? Well, obviously there's some kind of spirit that embodies all of the deer and tells them that they are deer and they will give birth to deer. We would call that DNA. They called it the spirit, or the pneuma, or a lot of other terms, but basically it's the spirit. Soul is unique to you. So your soul is who you are individually as a person. The spirit would be humanity, the spirit of humanity. So you had a body, you had a soul, you had a spirit. And those things will be symbolized in alchemy by different chemicals and different processes and go through transformations. Yes, and of course the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost is a very famous trinity. Those do tie into some of the trinities in here. There's also a trinity of metals in alchemy, the salt, sulfur, and mercury, that were believed to be the 3 building blocks of every metal. Alchemists recognize 7 metals: gold, silver, tin, lead, copper, what are the other ones? I got 5. Gold, silver, tin, copper, lead. I don't remember the others, but there were 7. But they were all built from combinations of mercury, sulfur, and salt. Originally, they thought it was just mercury and sulfur, and then I think one guy a few centuries later was like, nah, we need salt. We need salt too. And each one represented different things. Salt represented the body. It was female. It was receptive. The sulfur was the soul. It was male. It was penetrative, which is something that also kind of ties into Kabbalah, this idea that everything either receives energy or gives energy. And then Mercury, which we'll go into more detail on much later, is the hermaphrodite, and the balance between the 3. The importance of 3 comes from the fact that 2 cannot unify. 2 is opposites. Yes and no. Male and female, they negate each other. But if you have a 3rd, you can create a balance, something that is in the middle. Yes, no, and maybe. Male, female, intersex, that kind of thing. Trinities matter a lot in this kind of alchemy because it was believed that when you added a 3rd element, you would be able to create balance between them and from the 3 create something new. We will get into more of that when we actually talk about the way that they go through their steps of creating things. But now we're going to talk about the 4 elements. There's actually 5. Shh, don't tell. The 4 elements are earth, air, water, and fire. There is also a 5th one called quintessence. Quintessence is ether. It is the soul. It is not really measurable. You can't really go, ooh, look, it's ether. It's not. It's kind of more of a metaphysical concept, so most alchemists talked about 4 rather than 5, even though they all knew what quintessence and ether were. Earth, air, fire, and water are believed to make up everything in the universe in some combination, and each of them is themselves made up of 2 of 4 qualities, which make up everything. So these are the bricks, the Lego bricks that God used to build his universe house. There's hot, cold, dry, and wet. So fire is really hot and very dry. Air is very hot and wet. Earth is cold and dry. Water is cold and wet. And whenever you, like, say, add heat to water, it becomes air. If you put, cold on fire, it turns into ash, which is earth. So it was believed there was a kind of, I think I have a, did I put a, nope, that's the 3. No, these are all out of order. What the heck? I thought I had a circle. I must not have used the circle. I have to find where it went. Anyway, we were kind of on that. It was believed that fire, air, water, and earth were part of everything. So you've got the 3 building blocks of salt, mercury, sulfur. You've got the 4 elements that make up everything. When you combine those together and in the proper order, it was thought you were going to be able to succeed at making the stone, at completing what they called the great work. So you had to have the 4 elements, you had to have the 3 building blocks of metal, the combination of which was being figured out in the actual process of alchemy. Let's see. Everything is made of the 4 elements, and differences between objects or materials are caused by the differing proportions in which the elements are combined in them. That was the idea behind the elements. Godski. Alright, so, moving forward, let's talk about the planets. Let's see if I think that's the image for the planets. The planets were a huge part of alchemy, which you think, what, why? But it had to do with, again, the Kabbalah and the Christian tradition and stuff going on at the time. All of these mythological and religious beliefs really heavily influenced science. And it was believed that the universe, Earth was the center, the planets and the sun were circling their Earth. The pattern varied, different scientists had different ideas, but Earth at the center was the big one until Copernicus came along. And then outside of all those spheres, where the sun is, or, wherever the sun is, most of the time the sun is on the outside, sometimes people put it in the middle or whatever, that's where God is. God is out in space. He's out in the universe. That's where heaven is. And when a person's born, the soul descends through the spheres to Earth. That's what corrupts it, because all the planets and stuff in outer space are dirty, man. Nobody's washed those planets. And when it gets to Earth, it's corrupted by the physical world. And that's where the impurities, illness, death come from, is those impurities that come from the descent. When we die, we ascend back up the ladder, back up to where God is out there. So it's believed everything on Earth is affected by the emanations of God's light through the planets, that the planets and the stars and all that light shining down affects things. And so every planet had a sphere of influence on things, herbs, animals, days of the week, in which they had more power and more light shining down on the world and influencing them. They also were all associated with different metals. And the sun was gold, obviously, because gold, sun, God, everything, all associated with that heat and fire and the color gold and the stone. So the celestial spheres influence the entire world, especially rocks, which has to do with the fact that they thought rocks were alive, a lot like plants. They thought that rocks were seeds that grew in the earth, and that whatever planet was out there influencing the rocks, then that's the one that would grow. So the moon influences silver. Oh, well, it's a great full moon out, and now I found some silver in the ground. It must have grown from moonlight. They literally thought they were seeds. So like Jacob's ladder. Yeah. They did often portray it as a ladder, which again is from the Bible and from a bunch of different things. At the time, they only knew of 7 planets, but that was perfect because 7 is the divine number. There's 7 notes in an octave, there's 7 days of the week. I mean, 7 is everywhere. Even before, which we'll talk more about the numerology later, 3 building blocks and 4 elements is 7. So 7 was incredibly important. And the metals, there were 7 metals that were said to be connected to the 7 planets. They are seeds that grow in the ground. Yay. We discussed how Earth is the center, and they believed that God was on the outside as part of the sun. One of the arguments against a sun-centric universe, this one guy argued that if God is turning the wheel of the universe, it's easier to turn a wheel from the outside than it is to stand in the center and try and turn a wheel. Which just, I mean, that's logical, I guess, but it's not. See, it's not very, that's not how it works, but, you know, they tried. Alchemists were a lot of trying their bests. You know, they got so close but so far on so many different things. Like DNA, they understood the concept that there was something that determined what a animal or a plant would be born as, but they just didn't have the scientific ability to actually root out what it was, so they called it pneuma, they called it spirit, you know? So now we come to the fun part, the numerology. Let's see where I put... Oh, that's the universe right there. The sun, or Deus, out on the outside, his energy emanating down through the spheres down to the earth, which is the center. Yep, there's 7 deadly sins and 7 virtues. Yeah, there's a lot of 7s. I wrote down more somewhere and don't remember what they all were, but anyway. So that's the universe, and now we're going to talk about the the numerology. Numbers are really important in the occult tradition. They have a lot of power and a lot of symbolism. There's in Judaism, in Kabbalah, which again, very important to alchemy, I think it's called Gematria, is Jewish numerology, which numerology is also its own thing. But numbers all had meanings, and they are important in that they represent certain things, they have certain powers and abilities, and they were a big part of figuring out how to make the Philosopher's Stone. Let's see. You can commit sins and be sinful, but you are born impure, descending rather than original sin. Well, it's not that it was rather than original sin. To tie back into the idea of impurity, it was basically believed that the reason for the impurity and the fall from heaven was the fall of Lucifer, the fall of man, was the reason for all this impurity. It wouldn't have existed if those transgressions hadn't happened. But they explain, I guess it's to say original sin existed. The process of the impurities was, you know, the reason that it happens is original sin. The process was, as you float down, you get dirty. And each planet was believed to infect you with a different problem. I think Venus was like being too sexy. I think Mercury was liking money too much, miserliness, that kind of thing. And remember that all this stuff, none of it is universal, because different alchemists had different ideas. It's just some of them became more popular. Why is that thing still doing that? I don't know why that chat box... I'm gonna have to research why that thing keeps messing up. So getting to numbers. If you remember, in the green tablet I read earlier, it discussed the one quite a lot. It's an important concept in alchemy, the one. The one is God. The one is everything. Everything is the one. All is one. The reason all is one is because God is part of everything. And if God is part of all things, then everything is one thing, because one is God. God is one. But how do you create the one? Well, number one is God, so we have that number. 2 is the genders, the duality, male, female, yes, no. So that's 2. 3 is the trinity of Mercury, sulfur, and salt. And 4 is the elements. The 4 elements that make up everything. The 4 elements make up everything. The 3 make up all metals. The 2 make up humanity. And the 1 is God. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 is 10. And 10 is 1 and 0. And 1 plus 0 is 1. So the 1 and the 2 and the 3 and the 4 make 1. And 1 is all. That's the mathematical formula of alchemy. That is what they wanted to make. They believed if you could add God and the duality and the trinity and the elements all together, you could have the one. And the idea was that the process of doing that and getting rid of the impurities, of using all the building blocks and perfecting them, would create the one, the stone, immortality, man as God. That would have made it perfect. That is the process in numbers of how to make the perfect stone and the perfect person. The person is the vessel, is what one of the writers says. Man is the vessel, because again, this is supposed to be a spiritual experience. You are supposed to transform and become more perfect when you're doing this. The attempt to reconcile 4, the elements, with 3, Mercury, sulfur, salt, and 2, which is opposites, day and night, male and female, and turn them all into 1, the stone, is the principal preoccupation of later alchemy. That comes from the black arts. It's also called the tetraclys, which is that triangle there, where you have the building blocks all creating one shape, but there's actually 10 spaces in the shape. Anyway, that's the fun math that they do in the thing. Bohm, which is one of the famous alchemists, he calls the duality, the yes and no in all things. All things consist of yes and no, but they are not 2 things side by side, but only one thing. Were it not for these 2, which are in constant conflict, all things would be nothing and would stand still and motionless. It's pretty fun and interesting. So now we're going to get to a really important part, which is Mercurius, or Mercury. Now, I've said earlier that originally they believed there was only 2 things in all stones that they could use to create the Philosopher's Stone. Eventually, they settled on 3. Why did they settle on 3? Because 2 is polar opposites. They can't be united. You cannot make yes and no mean the same thing. You have to have a middle ground, and that's Mercurius. Mercurius is the middle. Mercurius is named for Mercury, who is Hermes, god of magic and travel and all kinds of things. Mercurius is also the philosopher's Mercury, and is both genders. He is a hermaphrodite, what we might call intersex. He is also known, I'm going to say he just because that's what people tend to call him, he, Mercury, because Mercury originally was a male god. I'm just going to make that easier than, I guess I could say them. The Philosopher's Stone theory is involved in alchemy. Yeah, it's part of, the terms change, elixir of life, Philosopher's Stone, all kinds of things. Mercurius, that's pretty great. They had different terms for it, but it basically meant, discovering immortality, discovering the formula for gold, it wasn't always a physical object or a stone even, but it was the search for knowledge, for truth, the search for truth. So, Mercurius represented the balance between things, and not only was it representative of the god, but of the element, the mercury, because mercury can be a liquid, the mercury that's in a thermometer, it can also be a solid. It is both solid and liquid, male and female. It is the balance between everything. It is also believed to be the unique spirit that is in everything, the power that is in everyone, the pneuma, which is the unique spirit in everyone. They call it quicksilver, they call it aqua vivae. It is what gives people life, argent vive. Everyone has Mercury inside them, or Mercurius inside them, creating life and power in them. It is also called Azoth. We will talk more about that later. Mercurius is both the god that presides over all of the process of alchemy, and it is the element that is present in the entire process. It is we who know Mercurius, but he who knows himself through us and in us. We participate in his knowledge of himself. We only know creation by participating in the process of creation. The underlying unity beneath all diversity is what Mercurius is. Because we're all alive, but we're alive in different ways. Plants are different and people are different, but Mercurius unites all of us. It's the spark of life. And the fact that Mercurius is androgynous or a hermaphrodite is really important because it's believed that that is the more perfect and godlike way to be. The reason for this is a couple reasons, but God creates life without being male or female. God does not need to have, sexual relations or anything. God just creates life. and is both male, female, and not male, female. The act of being gendered is a human thing. It is lesser. There's a belief among some alchemists that the original person in the Garden of Eden was not Adam and Eve, but Ur-Adam, who was male and female, untainted, until the fall. And the fall is what split humanity into male and female, which was a lesser form of existence, because Ur-Adam was completely together and was able of making life by himself. There was also the idea that Jesus was the first successful Philosopher's Stone, and that he returned, and the process of being on the cross and dying and coming back as a god was the perfection of humankind as the Philosopher's Stone, and he was an androgynon, and it was believed that he was androgynous, that he did not actually have a gender, and that was part of his perfection. Because God is singular and creates life, so the perfect human would be singular and able to create life. Therefore, the perfect human is transgender. I don't make the rules. That's just how it is. But that's why they use that kind of imagery in a lot of the alchemy figures. They'll have characters with like 2-3 heads that have both sets of genitals. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I'm sure there's some folks that would not enjoy that. Alright, so now we should be... Yes, that's another picture of Mercury, but with the 2 heads that I was talking about. We should be about to talking about the actual process of creating the stone, or of basically being an alchemist. The process that you were studying to try and make your perfection. So there was a lot of steps that could or couldn't be in the process of alchemy. Everybody had their own ideas. Some people said there were 4. Some said there were 12. I mean, it was a very varied process. Some people used different chemicals. Some people did this. Everybody had their own idea about how to do it. But there are 4 steps that are basically always the same. 4 things. They're kind of umbrellas. And within those umbrellas, you might do different things. You might use different stuff. But those umbrellas are basically all the same. The whole process is called the Great Work, or the magnum opus, which is, that's the life's work of the alchemist, is perfecting this search, this study of alchemy. The lesser and greater works are the 2 halves of the process, and the 2 halves themselves have 2 halves. The great work is made of the lesser work and the greater work, and the lesser work is nigredo and albedo. The greater work is cintrinias and rubedo. We'll go through what that means later. The lesser work was about spiritualizing the body, turning the body into spirit. The greater work was about embodying the spirit. The spirit becomes physical again. So essentially, the physical form transcends as a spirit, it ascends, it reaches nirvana, and then re-physicalizes in a new perfect form made better by its expansion into greatness. Before we can do all that, we have to have the right materials. The first material you need, the most important, is the prima materia, the first matter. Prima materia is believed to be the black earth from Eden, the Garden of Eden. It was what God used to make everything. It was something that exists everywhere in nature, but is generally regarded as worthless. It is made of animal, vegetable, and mineral. It has a body, a soul, and a spirit. It grows from flesh and blood. It is made of fire and water. It is a stone, but it is not a stone. Unknown yet known to everyone. Despised and yet unimaginably precious. Coming from God, but not coming from God. It was everything and it was nothing. It is what unites all of us. And if you could get the prima materia, you could do anything, because it is possibility. That's why it's not really a thing, because it could be anything. It is the possibility to have anything, make anything at all. It was extremely fertile and powerful. For that reason, it was often depicted as female, often as black, like the Black Madonna, I think it is. It was also called the Radus Icpicius, root of itself, because it wasn't dependent on anything else. It could create by itself. It was represented by raw chaos, basically, that could become anything. It was what God used to make the universe, and it is the piece of divine in all things, and the origin of the elements. So if you go back and God made the universe from the elements, well, first he made the elements from the prima materia. Prima materia is what we need to be able to make the stone. Because if you can make anything from the prima materia, well, then you can make the stone from it. And if everything is made from prima materia, then somewhere in everything, there's a spark of divinity. There's that prima materia. So the process of alchemy is, you take a thing, and you strip it down to its prima materia, to what it is, basic, divine spark of what it is. And then you use that spark to make something else. To make gold. That is what it is. Is prima materia now what we call dark matter? I can see that. I get it, yeah, maybe. I don't know enough about what dark matter is to say for sure. It is not matter in any normal sense of the term, but the possibility of matter. It can only be described in contradictory terms. It has no qualities or properties, but at the same time it has all qualities and properties because it contains the possibility of all things latent within it. So you strip the characteristics from something, you figure out its little tiny divine spark, and you use that spark to create something else. That is what you need to create the Philosopher's Stone. So the process, these 4 steps, are about taking something, typically lead, burning it, bringing it down to prima materia, using the prima materia to create gold. So let's get into the 4 steps. They are named, I think in Latin, and each one is named for a color which best represents what is going on in that stage. And the colors often were what was used to represent them in artwork. That's a representation of the prima materia, which is to say all things. That's why the image is like all this stuff. So this is the steps to create the Philosopher's Stone. First step is negredo, which is black. It is also represented by the element of fire. Negredo is death. If you're gonna make something new, first you have to destroy what's coming before. Like putting eggs into a cake. You have to crack them and stir them up, and then you make something new. It's represented by the crucifixion, by the color black, so it begins in darkness, and it represents a descent into death. Think about the descent into the underworld, the going to sleep at night, like it is death. It is ruled by what's called the black sun in alchemy imagery. What it is literally is calcinato, which is blackening and putrefying, letting the thing die, burning it down, that kind of thing. It's called the death of the old king, or more literally as a person, it's the death of the ego, letting go of the ego of the self, letting it die so you can be reborn as something better. It's represented by the planet Saturn, because Saturn's the furthest planet out there, and the farthest from Earth. It's the one that's in darkness. So in the first step, you have to die, enter darkness, and then, only then, can you rise up as something new. That would be the second step, albedo, which is white. It is represented in the step as water. It is the whiteness beyond the blackness. You think about when you pass out and then you wake up and everything's all bright. That's what that is. It is the rise after the fall, symbolized by the by the moon, silver and purity. It's the removal of all color. Think about something that's so bleached there's nothing left in it. The whitening, also called abluatio, which is like baptism, that kind of thing. It's purifying, and it's associated with Jupiter, which is the next planet. It also has to do with the idea of solve et coagula, which is what the first steps of this is. It is dissolving and coagulating, dissolving and reforming. That's what these first 2 steps are. The death is the dissolving of the thing, and then the rebirth, the creation of it in a new form, the reforming of the thing. Then we have the coagulation, which is actually the bringing things together. It is the step of earth. Think of it as breaking new ground. We died and we were purified. All of our nastiness removed, all of our colors. We are whitened to bone. Now we're being born in a new body. It is congealing and thickening into something new. This is the yellow phase, or Citrinias, ruled by Venus and Mars. It is represented by fertile earth, breaking new ground, arriving in a new island. It is embodying, incarnating. We've destroyed the thing, we've purified it, we've given it a new perfect form. And then the last step is rubedo, which is red. And so we've had earth, we've had water, we've had fire. The last step, air. It is bringing everything together. It is returning to one. Everything comes from the one and returns to the one, by the one, for the one. It's the marriage of heaven and earth. It's represented as birth. You think about you've been killed, and now you've been brought through purifying and being reformed, and now you are born again. It is completion, unity, synthesis. It's represented by blood. You've entered a new dimension because you're this new pure thing, born into a new world. You have a astral projected into perfection. That is the last step. It is often symbolized by the sun. The symbol of the sun in alchemy is a circle with a dot in the middle. The dot does not touch the circle, so it's not part of it, and yet it is inside of it. It is the one in everything. Let's see here. So the whole process is often seen as death, rebirth, marriage, and childbirth. Being you die, you are reborn. The new elements have married into each other and given birth to a new thing. The stone is the one mystically solidified, and it is man as God, which again, a lot of the ideas behind alchemy were ascending to become like God. Now, there were two methods behind alchemy, and the methods basically are different ways of doing the steps. Like I said, everybody had different steps. Some people added some, removed some, whatever. Two of the most popular famous methods were the dry and the wet. The dry method involved something called the secret fire, which is, let me see back up here again. The secret fire is a fire burning without flames. It basically radiation, inner warmth. You think about the fact we're all warm right now. We have inner heat, but we're not on fire. That's that kind of flame. It was basically going from step when you've done the death and the whitening. From that step, you turn the heat up, and that's the dry method. Use the secret fire to jump right to the stone. It often failed. But the other step, the wet method, involved distillation, which could take years more time because you had to distill the product over and over again to purify it. So that's why it's called wet method, dry method. The dry method was really fast and really unstable. The wet method was stable, but it took forever. Let's see here. So, within those steps, there's a lot of other things. There's a lot of symbolism, because these guys were trying to hide what they were talking about. They didn't want their rivals stealing their stuff. They didn't want just anybody having this info. So it was hidden in a lot of symbolism and a lot of imagery. There was a lot of different characters representing things. A lot from Greece and mythology. Apollo, Dionysus were often in here. Dionysus represented darkness, and Apollo, obviously the sun. He was often associated with Jesus and God and that kind of thing. And they created these incredibly detailed books and things that showed all this imagery that was meant to in the right person's hands, teach them how to attain all these secrets. People over the years have claimed that they attained them, and some folks have said, yes, I was born in the year 1000 and I have been alive, but a lot of people can claim that. Just as many people in the medieval times had the bad luck of catching the attention of a powerful king who would drag them around and try and force them to make gold for them, and when they failed, throw them in the Tower of London. So it could be dangerous to be an alchemist, which is part of why they hid their secrets. The true alchemist was meant to basically live in a cabin in the woods and do his science and stay hidden from everyone and keep secrets and have one student that they taught everything to, and that was it. Everybody else was a charlatan. But there were a lot of different traditions, a lot of different secrets, a lot of different stuff between all these different traditions and thousands of years. But what does that have to do with Haunting Ground? Well, it has a lot to do with Haunting Ground, because Haunting Ground ultimately is about an alchemist trying to perfect his formula, trying to become as a god. And so we're going to explore now how alchemy influences the story of Haunting Ground and its various themes and things. Hello, everyone who's joined us. Sorry that I haven't said hi or interacted with the chat much, but I've just kind of been trying to get through my notes before I lose steam. So now we're going to talk about Haunting Ground. And of course, you know me, I have to start by talking about name meanings. And I know sometimes people pick on me like, nah, they don't mean that much. They do this time. Fiona, our main character, her name means white. We've talked a lot about how color has a lot to do with alchemy. Well, white is the purification step. It is the second step in the lesser work. She is representative of purity. Her dog also has a name that represents something important. Huey is a nickname for Hugh. Hugh means soul or intellect. When you combine that with her parents, her father's name, Ugo, is mind. Her mother's name, Ayla, is island or earth, physical body. Her parents are the body and the mind, and her dog is the soul. The trinity, the three things that make up everything are all hers. They are part of her. The soul, the dog, is the one that lives past the car crash and actually helps her get through everything, because the mind and the body are the physical parts. You have to let go of those. You have to lose those to ascend. So she gets to keep the soul, she gets to keep her dog, but she has to lose her parents to be able to ascend as one like God. There's also a character named Areolus, who is in notes and things. He's the old alchemist that started all this and is her ancient ancestor, the one that is cloned by all the various clones in the story. His name means gold. So obviously, he is the one that perfected everything originally. He is the gold. He finished the work, or he was successful in the work because he became immortal with the cloning, that kind of thing. All the names have meanings, but those are the ones I think are the most interesting. Of course, we have to talk about the fact the game basically has 4 chapters. There's really 6, but they tie into each other because you have 4 main enemies: Debilitas, Daniela, Ricardo, Lorenzo in his various forms. So you have 4 enemies and 4 steps in alchemy. And each of the enemies you fight are in some way imperfect. They are impure. Debilitas is the impurity of body. He is mentally deficient. He's just a physical being. He is animal instinct. Daniela is infertile, which fertility is a huge thing in alchemy. She cannot create life, which is what you need to create a Philosopher's Stone. Ricardo has emotional inability. He has no emotional feelings. Lorenzo calls him a failure. And then Lorenzo himself is completely immoral. They're all failures in one way or another that Fiona overcomes and defeats. And in that way, she is completing the steps of the alchemist. Debilitas, the first step, the death, is actually the car crash. She is in this car crash, and thank you, Faku. It means golden, not gold. But basically, it means referencing the gold of the Philosopher's Stone. She's in the car crash and her parents die, and she wakes up in a cage naked. She has survived, or not survived, but she has gone through a death of a kind. She's lost her parents. She's, almost died, lost her clothes, which is, had everything removed. Essentially, kind of like in the Negretto, where everything is dissolved and removed, she has lost everything. It's all gone. The next step, the whitening, is, she's got her new clothes, her dog, her, searching out the castle, trying to figure out what's going on, and defeating these enemies. She is, in a way, rebuilding herself. And at the end of the game, she walks through a door of bright gold light that has the Tree of Life on it. She has become the stone. Oh, thank you, Dine. Where did I get this shirt? From ET, which does 24-hour daily sale things. Unfortunately, that means you've missed your chance for this shirt, but you should check them out. They do a lot of cool stuff. So Lorenzo is step 4, but he's actually 3 steps in 1, because again, 4 and 3 are 2 of the most important numbers in this universe, and his 3 are the youth, the old guy, and the guy on fire. Which is kind of representing the fact that he is a failed stone, because fire is the stone, fire is one of the most important parts of it. And he was the old man, he was the young man. It kind of ties into the themes of Trinity and the Mercury, sulfur, salt, the, mother, maiden, crone, even with the youth and the old and what have you. So there's 4 steps and there's 3 steps, all of them being defeated in a way to get through to the ending of the game. Let's see. To get through the castle, you have to get certain keys, and those keys unlock doors that let you keep moving forward. Each of the keys is named for a planet, and the order of them is the same order that the planets are supposed to be aligned to complete alchemy. First is the Negredo. Negredo is Saturn. Saturn's the first key you get when you defeat Debilitas. After that is the Albedo. Jupiter is the second key you get. Then you get the Mars and Venus, which both are associated with the Centrinias. Those keys are next. After that, you don't get a key, you get the Mercury staff, which is Mercurius, and is the most important thing, like one of the most important objects in the game, visually, because Mercurius is so important, but it's also the next step. The last key you get is used to unlock that final golden door, and that's the Soul Key, the sun, which represents God, represents the stone, represents the success of the alchemist, and of course the bright burning gold light. The freedom from the castle represents the fact that she's succeeded. She has become the stone, she has survived, she has gotten the golden key and stepped outside. There's also a lot of imagery in the castle that ties into alchemy. There are these triangles on certain statues, like the statue with the torture chamber, where you have to touch the things on the floor that are the different elements. The symbols on those are actually the symbols for the elements. I think I had... I thought I had a map of the various... Well, those are some of them, but it looks like I didn't put the bigger map in here. I need to figure out how to put more images in here for next time. But there's a lot of that kind of imagery just thrown around the castle. The three-headed dragon, you have to put in to the three-headed dragon's mouth tablets that have the words Mercury, sulfur, and salt on them. Three-headed dragon was representative of Mercurius. So the idea here is to create the path forward through the game, you have to use the 3 elements and the Mercurius to transform and create a path by putting them in the mouth of the 3 dragons. And of course, you also see all the astrology symbols everywhere, which represent the different steps, and they're ordered in the way that they are ordered in the various steps. The castle library. Let's talk about that for a second. The castle library has different books that you have to place in different places to be able to open the path forward. 2 of the books are actually named for famous alchemists. Paracelsus, who is probably the inspiration for Areolus, because Areolus was Paracelsus's middle name. You probably also would recognize him because his last name was von Hohenheim, if you've ever watched Full Metal Alchemist. Paracelsus is one of the most famous alchemists ever. He's also a really famous doctor. He invented the concept of toxicity. Like, the guy did a lot. The other one is Agrippa, who's also a very famous medieval writer, scholar, alchemist, that kind of thing. I actually happen to have the book that was in the library. 3 books of occultism, which he wrote. And the 3, again, freaking 3 is everywhere. This book is actually 3 books together in one, and it's a bunch of his letters and research and things, his ideas about the occult. I have one marked here. No, that's not it. Okay, this is an idea of what these kind of old texts sounded like. Chapter 1. How magicians collect virtues from the threefold world is declared in these 3 books. Seeing there is a threefold world, elementary, celestial, and intellectual, and every inferior is governed by its superior, and receiveth the influence of the virtues thereof, so that the very original and chief worker of all doth by angels, the heavens, stars, elements, animals, plants, metals, and stones, convey from himself the virtues of his omnipotency upon us. For those service he's made and created all these things, wise men conceive it no way irrational that it should be possible for us to ascend by the same degrees through each world to the very same original world itself, the maker of all things, the first cause, from whence all things are and proceed, and also to enjoy not only these virtues, which are already in the more excellent kind of things, but also beside these to draw new virtues from above. Basically, he was saying God and the stars radiate on all things, so obviously we should be able to go back up there and grab that and do what we want with it. And all those fancy words. Alright. So, near the end of the game, to get out of the castle, she has to go through and create a Philosopher's Stone. I think it's actually called the Red Godstone. To do that, there's 4 different machines in the castle that you have to go through and use and create the stone. To start, you have to get the prima materia, which, as I said earlier, was the spark of divinity that you always had to have to begin the process. Huey finds it out in the garden. So you put the prima materia into the extractor, because it's supposed to be extracting that divine light, that spark we need. And that creates sulfuric ore, which, of course, we've talked about sulfur is an important aspect of all this. That step represents the Nigredo, the death step. Now you have to take your ore and go to the purifier, which is the second step I was talking about, the whitening. So you have to purify it, create the next item, the ore. Then you synthesize it in the synthesizer to create the white godstone. That's the third step, the Centrinius. And then the last step with the transmuter creates the red godstone. That's the Rebudo. So the Rubedo, sorry. So you've got all 4 steps in the machines that are in the castle. You go to the statue, the goddess, Lady Justice, who's got the blindfold and the scales. You put the stone on the scale and it measures it to see if it's worthwhile. That opens the door out of the castle. The castle itself, I don't know that it has a name, but part of it is called the House of Truth. The castle, the great work is about seeking the truth of the universe, trying to figure out the truth of what a thing is, how to make it, what to do, that kind of thing. Truth is a big part of alchemy. Outside of truth is chaos, is darkness, is the abyss, the things we don't know, the darkness. The forest outside the castle is called the Forest of Chaos because it represents the fact that within the house is the light of truth, and alchemy outside is the forest of chaos and darkness. That's fun to me. Another location, the water tower, is the step that you take for the third part of the story, which if I... let's see here. The third step, where you've done Daniela and Debilitas, you go to the water tower to fight Ricardo, and that is kind of the distillation phase almost, with the water tower out in the middle of the water. But of course it also has that puzzle at the top where you have to arrange the planets and go in the right order, because again, the planets represented the actual steps of alchemy. Belly Castle, yes, that is it, because it's named for her family. Belly, I think, is Italian for beautiful. And we have a reference to the methods. This is more, I think, conjecture, but Lorenzo does at one point mention the wet method, the dry method, and these reference the different ways to become immortal. And in their universe, those ways are probably cloning and pregnancy. The cloning being the dry method of becoming immortal, because, pregnancy's really wet. And the pregnancy's the other way of becoming immortal. That's the dry and the wet method. Whew. So before we close up here, we're going to talk about one more thing that I think is really fun. It's not entirely related to alchemy, but is a cool part of the game. The golems, which have more to do with a Jewish tradition and mysticism, because they're a big part of Jewish folktales and things like that. Golems being stone creatures that you could create and control via words, because in Hebrew and in Kabbalah, words have power. Each letter in the Hebrew alphabet has a specific meaning, a specific way to draw it. The lines have meanings. They are really powerful. And so the words themselves have power. And it was believed that the words could control the golem. They could do lots of things. There's specifically a folktale of a rabbi who created a golem with the word emeth on its head, emeth being the Hebrew word for truth. But he grew afraid of the golem, and so decided he was going to try and kill it before it could kill him by erasing the first letter, because if you take away from emeth, it becomes meth, which is death in Hebrew. And so he tells the golem to kneel and tie his shoes or something. And when he kneels, he rubs the letter off, and it collapses into stone, but the stone collapses on the rabbi, and he dies. Well, in Haunting Ground, the golems can be controlled with the tablets you make from letters, and one of the first ones that you need to move can be moved with either emeth or meth. If you use emeth, he walks away. If you use meth, he crumbles into dust and dies. But that's what those words are. They are Hebrew words, emeth being truth, and again, truth is such a big part of this story, but that in particular doesn't really have a lot to do with Hebrew or with alchemy, other than the fact that Kabbalah and alchemy are pretty connected. That would be a whole other video. Kabbalah is a pretty big part of this story as well, in the fact that they tie together. The tree of life, which is on the doors, and the machine that you use to make items, is a big part of how the Kabbalists arrange the universe. They have a similar idea that God is up here and emanates down energy and life and light, and the different emanations represent different things in our lives. Love, anger, that kind of thing that come down. So kind of similar to the spheres that radiate from the planets, the tree of life emanates down to us and has two different branches two different pillars that represent the light and the dark, the chaos and the purity, and that kind of thing. Thank you, Ice Blaze. Thanks to everyone who's donated during all this. I'm sorry I've been kind of just talking and getting my thoughts out and not paying as much attention to the chat, but I've really enjoyed doing it. There's a lot of history and things in alchemy, but I think this basic understanding really does paint a lot of Haunting Ground in a different light, where it's not like they go really heavy-handed into a lot of alchemy symbolism, but the general overall layout of the plot has a lot of big things in common with alchemy. The 4 steps, the importance of the numbers, the different things that happen to her and the way they happen, with the whitening and the blackening and everything. It's a very interesting kind of concept. And of course the Azoth, which I mentioned earlier and almost forgot to tie back in. Azoth, which is the magic that she has and whatever that they want to take and create life, that's another word for Mercurius, for the spark of life that's in everybody and is so necessary to alchemy. That's what Azoth is. It's really fun and very fascinating and really made me want to play the game again, but we'll have to keep playing some other things. We'll do more of this in the future. I'm thinking maybe every other two weeks or more if I'm quick. Like the Tree of Life, like in Fullmetal Alchemist. It's been too long since I've watched Fullmetal Alchemist, but I think that is something that is... I do think they use the Tree of Life in Fullmetal Alchemist, if I remember right. But yeah, thanks for joining me, folks. If you like this, if you like what I do, and you can support it, for as little as 99 cents a month, you get a lot of bonus content. I've actually been reading aloud from my research. I read the entire chapter of Alchemy from the Black Arts in the private YouTube videos. So there's a lot of really cool stuff you could enjoy there. You can get free copies of my books, discounts on merchandise, extra videos, all kinds of things, and it really does help me out. You can follow me on social media to keep up to date with things like, when I'm streaming and whatever. This is now also going to be on Facebook and Twitch, so if you're on those platforms, if you want to share my work and help me that way, that would be great. It would help me a lot. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and all that. Yeah, anyway. I'm not sure what game we'll do next with this. I'm kind of trying to tie it into what other games we've been streaming. I might do something with Fatal Frame and some things there, but I've been having trouble finding first resources for what I want to talk about. But anyway, I'm working on that one. Join the Discord. Today I'll be turning on Twin Peaks. I'm not going to be joining in vocally because my voice is gone. But folks will be watching episodes of Twin Peaks in the Discord if you want to join in. It's quite a lot of fun hanging out in the Discord. I really enjoy it. And yeah, I think that's everything. I've given the spiel and all that. Working on the 3rd Silent Hill book, so it'd be a great time to be a member and get merchandise discounts, because that counts for books. Yeah, I think that is everything for now. So thank you all for joining me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see y'all tomorrow for Heaven Official's Blessing at 2, and followed by Alan Wake in the afternoon. So yeah, I will see you guys later. Bye.